What if teachers treated every student as if that student were the teacher's own child? Hi, this is Mark Barnes in another edition of the Hack Learning Podcast, and today we are going to hack rapport building with students. And this is one of the most complicated things in education. You know, we get so caught up as educators in teaching standards, in meeting curriculum guidelines, in worrying about how we organize our classroom or various classroom management skills, today's activity, tomorrow's lesson. We're so involved in those things that sometimes the most important thing in education escapes us, and that is the relationship between the teacher and the student. I know this because I struggled with it for a very long time, and ultimately it's this relationship building that I figured out, and there are a lot of facets to it. We can have many podcast episodes built around this whole idea because there are so many layers to this onion. So today, as we do in Hack Learning, we provide fix-it right, fix-it now solutions. And I want to talk about a couple of things that you can do to improve the rapport you have with students in your classroom as early as tomorrow or today if you're listening, maybe on your way to school. And I want to use my own background and some experiences I had, and then a couple of quick steps that I used that changed everything for me in the classroom. So I said in the open, you know, what if we treated all of our students like they were our own? This is something I learned many years ago, and it's a piece of advice I used to give to student teachers, and I had quite a few in the last few years of my classroom teaching career. And the most important thing when we talked about dealing with kids is this question that I asked. What if this child were your own? What would you do? And another important one was, let's say that parent-teacher conferences are tonight, and you're going to have to face this student's mother. What are you going to say to that mother about your relationship with her child? And this was such an important lesson for me because when I became a parent, I think I became a better teacher because I started thinking of that. I thought, how do I want my child to be treated? And of course, you always want them to be treated, you know, beautifully, wonderfully, with dignity and respect and courtesy. And for a long time in education, I didn't do that. And I'll give you an example that I think really exemplifies how the wrong kind of relationship can be damaging to everyone. So many years ago, I was working on a collaborative project with kids, something where they were working in small groups, and it was based on a novel we had read, and they were creating something. There were all kinds of steps to the project, but in the end, one of the assets or artifacts they created was a poster that would sort of demonstrate other things they were building, and they would stand up in front of the class and talk about it. And they were very involved and intricate for the most part. Well, a group of girls stood up in front of the class, and they had modeled theirs, and in my estimation back then, it wasn't very good. Now, I came a long way since then, thankfully, and learned that judging the work is not nearly as good as providing objective feedback. And again, that's talked about in other podcasts, and we'll continue to talk about it in the future. But what I did, and I thought this was a good practice. I was young and inexperienced. I had picked what I judged to be the best example of work. And I would take that up and model it for the kids and say, now look at what this does and why this is so good. Well, on one day what I did is I took this group of girls' work that I didn't like, and I compared it to this other one. Now, I did it in a class that they weren't in. That was my hack back then. I thought, well, I can show one good example and one bad example, and if I do it in a different class, they won't be there, so they won't know. So I did this and said, look at these two, and look at how much better this one is and how much more work's been put in, and then look at this one over here, and you see how, it's not even close. And, of course, it wasn't even really a good lesson because we didn't get into all of the reasons why one might be good or might not be, or what objectives one met versus the other. At any rate, what I learned then is that what happened is one student in a class who was friends with one of the girls in the other class saw her at lunch and told her about how Mr. Barnes had compared her work and the group's work to someone else's and basically called it bad. Said it's not good for this reason and that reason, and it looks like it was a lazy effort, which, that's a tough thing to judge how much work someone really put in. So this was very upsetting to these girls, and they didn't say anything to me. Well, the following day, at the end of the school day, I got a call from the office that a parent was there and wanted to see me, and I said, yes, of course, and she came down, and there was no one around, and we sat down and had a conversation, and she told me how upset her daughter was, and that she was in tears because she had been humiliated because I compared her work to someone else's and basically said it's not good, and I called it a lazy effort, and she had, in her estimation, the child had put in a lot of work. She and her peers had spent some hours on it. And again, in my judgment, it wasn't good. So I said that, and that was very hurtful to them because then people were coming up to them and saying, hey, your work got shown as the bad example. And kids can be very fragile. Adults can be. And it was very sad. And at that moment in time when this parent said this to me, and she was in tears herself because her child was hurt, and I had hurt the child. It was a really eye-opening experience for me, and I said, I'm really terribly sorry that I did that, and the last thing I would ever want to do would be to hurt your child. And in the end, I think the parent and I left on a fragile but still solid ground because I admitted making a mistake, for one. And I think that the hack here, I said I want to give you something you could do today or tomorrow to improve your class and specifically to improve rapport with your students because it's so important. Kids will work a whole lot harder and will want to be successful in your class if they like you. I used to say I don't care if my kids like me. Believe me, you want your students to like you. You don't have to be best friends with them. You're the adult and that's the child. But when they like you and like the way that you treat them and feel loved and respected, they'll work a whole lot harder. So one of the things to do is, first of all, admit when you're wrong. We have such a hard time as educators admitting when we're wrong. For the longest time, I never wanted to. And I was quick to tell the kids, hey, I've been doing this forever, and you're a child, and, what do you know? So what I did is I pulled these girls into the hallway while other kids were working in class one day, and I told them that I had made a mistake, and what I did was thoughtless, and that I was sorry, and that I would never embarrass them again. And I can tell you that was it was incredible because our relationship grew from that day forward. We had a wonderful relationship, and we could laugh in class, and we could joke, and they would ask me, hey, how was your weekend? And we created a bond, a mutual respect, because they were surprised. And in fact, one of them told one of my colleagues about the incident and told the other teacher she was shocked that I would apologize and admit being wrong. So there's a hack for you. Admit that you're wrong, for one. And another one is don't be afraid to apologize to kids. You'll make mistakes because you're human. And you'll make more even after you apologize. But if you admit that you're wrong and you apologize and you tell kids you're going to try to be better, they'll appreciate it, they'll respect you, and they'll come into class and they'll want to be successful, not only for themselves, but for you because of that mutual respect. And there's just nothing like that. I'd love to hear more about what you think about rapport building and what hacks you use to create wonderful environment of mutual respect in your classroom. Feel free to comment at #HackLearning on Twitter. Also, there is the Hack Learning group on Facebook. Love to have you there. We continue the conversations always because together we're better than we are apart. See you next time on the Hack Learning Podcast.